Big LEZ'S League, an all rugby league experience.
Hello, welcome back to Big LEZ'S League, an all rugby league experience. I'm your host, Big Les. Make sure to click down here and subscribe to the YouTube. Welcome to the first edition of Finals Week 1, Finals Foresight for the NRL. We're going to go through and predict each week of the finals from now all the way up to the qualifying finals before the grand final. So the next 3 weeks, we are going to be predicting how we think each week of finals is going to go. How this is going to work, I'm literally going to go through on the ladder predictor and predict the rest of finals from now all the way up to the grand final. We're going to go through all of those weeks and give our tips and our predictions. As the weeks goes on, obviously, teams might play better than expected, or my tips might change, and we'll go through those each week for the next 3 weeks. That's our finals foresight is going to go. It's foresight into the upcoming games, into the upcoming finals. And then obviously by the end of each of these episodes, you'll find out who my grand final prediction is going to be. And I think it's going to stay the same for all the episodes. I cannot see this team that I've got there at the moment falling off anytime soon. So let's go through all of these games. The ladder predictor doesn't have any of these games in order. So in regards to order, I am going to try my best. But the first game, I know it is the Panthers taking on the Sydney Roosters. Now, for this one, I am going to go ahead and pick the Penrith Panthers. I think that with Nathan Cleary coming back into the side, they are going to be a very hard team to beat. In saying that, I still think this is going to be a tight game. We saw the Roosters only 2 or 3 years ago now, with a very depleted football side, obviously doing quite well in finals. They got to a prelim with a very depleted side, a ton of injuries in that team. They still managed to get to a prelim. So I think that the Roosters are going to show that same level of fight here. I think they are going to make a good push for finals, or through finals, I should say. So I'm going to take the Panthers, but I know it is going to be a very tight game here between the Panthers and the Roosters. The next game, it is the Cowboys and the Knights, I believe, is the next one. I am going to go ahead and take the Cowboys. I think the Cowboys, I believe they're at home. We'll actually go ahead and get the draw up. The next game was the Storm and Sharks. We'll go through that after. Cowboys, Knights, Cowboys at home. I really like the Cowboys here. I think they're on a bit of a roll. Sort of said it in the Rabbitohs radio podcast as well, but they're a bit like Hansel at the moment. It's so hot right now. The Cowboys, they're on a little bit of a streak, and I think they are going to keep that going into this final series. There's only one thing for me that sort of pushed the Cowboys away from being a real finals threat, and that was their defense. And they've fixed that up now. They've looked really good in the past week, obviously getting that big win over the Bulldogs. But the big thing for me that convinced me that they're a grand final threat this season, or going into the final series, it was the fact that they fixed up their defense. They kept the Bulldogs to 6. And I think that that is a real great first step, that if they can keep this consistent, they are a grand final threat, the Cowboys. And it's the only thing that we've sort of questioned them on all year, defense. And they fixed it up here. So Cowboys, for me, I take them. I think this is probably one of the only games, for me at least, that is going to go to that 13-plus margin. The next game, obviously the game before this, was the Storm and the Sharks. A bit out of order there, but that's okay. I am going to go with the Melbourne Storm. I just think they're going to be too hard to beat. I don't think the Sharks are going to come anywhere near close to beating the Storm. I think it is going to be a 1-12 game. I just don't think the Sharks are going to look as threatening as what Melbourne are going to be. Full strength, peaking at the right time. Pappenhausen comes back into the team as well. Whether he's 100% or not, we don't know. But I do think that the Melbourne Storm win convincingly in that 1-12 sort of way, where they look like they're the better team throughout the entire 80 minutes. That's how I think that game is going to go. Now, look, I guess the only thing contradicting that is that the Sharks did beat the Melbourne Storm in their previous matchup this season, but I am still going to take the Melbourne Storm here. I think that we're looking at a Melbourne Storm side that is really ready to peak, and we're going to see that in this game. Last game, Dogs and Seagulls. I'm going to take the Bulldogs. I think what we've seen for the past few weeks is a big wake-up call for the Dogs. I think that a lot of teams have started to figure them out a little bit in regards to the size of the pack. Hey, you guys aren't as big as us. We're going to really go ahead and try and bash you guys through the middle just because we can. And I think the Dogs have realised that teams are starting to figure them out in that regard and are really starting to test them through the middle. So I think the Dogs are really going to start to aim up here. I think we're going to see a lot more of a physical dog side going into this final series. They're really going to turn it up a notch. And obviously, with pretty much everyone back in this team now, minus Josh Adokar, I think they're going to be a real threat. Burton with the kicking game as well, getting them out of trouble. They missed that against the Cowboys. And there's a big reason as to why they weren't able to get themselves into a position where they could make this game even, because they just couldn't get out of their own end on a lot of the sets. I think that having Burton there that can kick 70 metres with ease is going to be such a godsend for them coming back into this side. I think they do get the win over Manly. I think having only played them 2 weeks ago as well is going to be a real positive for the Dogs. And I think that they're going to learn a lot from their last matchup against them. And I think they're going to get the win there. So in regards to how my finals is shaped up, obviously the Storm and the Panthers would get the week off. The Cowboys and the Bulldogs would go through into week 2. The Knights and the Seagulls would drop out in week 1. Now, it's a big call, obviously, with Tom Trbojevic coming back into this Manly Seagulls side as well, and how good they play at full strength Manly. I just think this Dog side is going to have a real gritty game, and they're going to get it done in a very tight manner, potentially golden point. Week 2 of the finals. So that would mean the matchups would be the Sharks and the Cowboys, and then the Roosters and the Bulldogs for the second week of finals to get into that qualifying final for the grand final. Second week of finals here, Sharks and Cowboys would be the first game. I am going to take the Cowboys in that one. As I said, the Cowboys, they're Hansel. They're too hot right now. I think they do go on a bit of a streak. As I said, they get deep into finals. If they keep that defensive intensity, now obviously going into next week when we come back here and do this podcast again, we could have a totally different opinion on the Cowboys here with their defense. And they obviously would lead to them dropping out of finals anyway. But for me, I think the Cowboys get the job done here over the Sharkies. I think that if they, as I said, they keep that defensive intensity and just roll through the middle like they did with Jason Taumalolo, have that spark, outpace the Sharks, I think they could definitely get the job done there. And I think the big thing of beating the Sharks is just containing their outside men. Obviously, first, second, third tackle, you're getting guys like Ronaldo, Kale Ito, Sione Katoa, Jesse Raymond coming out of their own end, just creating havoc there. They're so good coming out of their own end with the toughness, but also with the X factor as well. What they can do with the football is very hard to beat for a lot of teams. And defensively, if the Cowboys are switched on, they shut those guys down. The Cowboys get the job done there. For me, I would take then the Roosters to beat the Bulldogs. As I said, I think the Roosters get deep into finals. I think that's going to be one of the tighter games of this final series. I think this could be a golden point sort of game, or at least get close to it. But I'm going to take the Roosters to beat the Dogs in the second week of finals. Bit controversial, but we'll have to wait and see. That would lead to the third week of finals being the Storm and the Roosters, followed by the Panthers and the Cowboys. Storm, Roosters, Panthers, and Cowboys would be the third week of finals with all of our tips that we've done just then. In that week, the Storm v the Roosters, I'm taking Melbourne to beat the Roosters. I think that's where the Roosters crumble without all of their main men. I think that's where they're particularly going to miss Sam Walker against a well-oiled Melbourne machine that is just going to come in and dominate in this final series. I think they get the job done, Melbourne, and then they go on to the grand final to verse the Panthers. I think the Panthers beat the Cowboys. I think that Nathan Cleary, after a few weeks back, after that week off too, after that first game, I think that he's going to be well-oiled, ready to go, and he's going to have one of those performances where he puts this side on his back and he wins the game for them as well. And I think that the Panthers do beat the Cowboys in that sort of scenario, which leads us to a Storm and Panthers grand final. Storm Panthers grand final. I think this is going to be the most likely grand final. It is the boring answer, but that's the grand final I'm picking. I think that the Melbourne Storm would win that game. Now, obviously, we've got the Panthers to see this week yet. Now, opinion on that could change. If the Nathan Cleary comes out and kills it on the weekend and we see a Panthers side that we've seen over the past few years, that gritty side, but a side that can also blow teams off the park, the Panthers final side we've seen over the past 4 years, I'd probably switch my tip. But at the moment, I'm going with the Melbourne Storm. I think the Melbourne Storm are in their own league at the moment. I think they are easily the best team in the competition at the moment. And not just ladder and points and stuff like that. You actually watch the best games that these two sides have played this season. Melbourne have outplayed Penrith substantially this year. And I know Penrith have had a lot of injuries, but as I said, the best game that Melbourne have played and the best game that Penrith have played, I think the Melbourne game has been better substantially. I think that Melbourne, as I said, are in their own league right now. The footy that they're playing is outstanding. They've got a lot figured out. They need all of their guys present. And as I said, anything can happen. Knock on wood, no injuries during this final series, but anything can happen. Obviously, they missed Jerome Hughes last year to injury in the final series, which, in my opinion, was a big reason as to why they were unable to win that last game to get into the grand final. But I think that this year, if all of their guys are fit, which knock on wood they are, I think that they can get the job done over the Panthers. Let me know how your final series is shaping up. The NRL Ladder Predictor, you just look up Ladder Predictor. You can go on there and tip your final series and see how yours looks. But let me know in the comment section below how your final series is shaping up. We will come back next week, starting with finals game 2. We'll review the finals week 1 and our picks, and then obviously go and do finals week 2, and then go from there to the grand final. And if any of our tips change, we'll talk about it on that podcast as well. And I'll talk about why maybe some of the tips haven't changed and stuff like that as well, based on the footy we see this weekend. But super excited for this final series. I think it's the best final series we're going to get, compared to the last few years. I think this one is going to be special, particularly with how close the competition at the moment is. As I said, I think the only game this week that is going to go to 13 plus is going to be the Cowboys and the Knights, which I think the Cowboys will win 13 plus. Other than that, I don't think any other games will realistically go to 13 plus. And that Cowboys Knights affair could be 1 to 12 as well. Without KP, Dane Gagai, Bradman Best are playing, that could easily be a 1 to 12 affair. But I just think that the Cowboys, if they fix up their defense, especially on their edges, they're going to contain the Knights really well. And I think a lot of their attack comes through Kalen Ponga. I think if they, limit Kalen Ponga's ability to get into the game and how much ball he gets as well, the Cowboys are just going to get it done very easily. So let me know if you think I'm right. What would you change about my tips as well? And how does your grand final shape up? Who wins the grand final for you? The Panthers, the Storm? I saw a little bit of a smoky in there. Do the Bulldogs or the Cowboys maybe win it for you? Let me know in the comment section below. We'll see you guys in the next one.